As you mentioned, my name is Pritha. Not a historian. I'm not an academician. I'm a textile hobbyist at best. I earn my living by working as a doctor. I deliver babies, and I spend almost everything I earn on India travels and textiles. I am right now, in fact, in Maheshwar, the beautiful city of Ahilyabai Holkar. I am staying at her royal residence. This used to be one of the office rooms. It still serves as an admin headquarters of the hotel that the Holkar family runs. So about muslin, muslin has got many poetic names. It is a textile of legendary reputation, but it is also a word that is often used and misused, partly because what used to be muslin of yore doesn't exist anymore. I'll explore that in more details as we go along. So, why did I choose muslin as my topic? That is because of my own ethnic heritage. I'm a Bengali. Yes, so I am very much Bengali, and that was me last year around this time, and that will be me again in a week's time. So I have got an emotional relationship with muslin. I've grown up hearing stories of muslin and British atrocities and all of those things. So I was interested in learning more about it. My current home is in London, and Victoria and Albert Museum happens to be my most favorite museum in the world. It probably has one of the largest collections of muslin. It might also be the largest collection, and they have enormous displays of muslin. And I have been fortunate to bond with their curators and academicians, and I'm also a member of the Vienna Museum and the National Art Library that is housed within their premises. I will first like to go through the sources that I've used in order to make this presentation. Most of the information was obtained on the book Muslin from Sonia Ashmore. She is a senior textile researcher. She also associated with Victoria and Albert Museum, and this book Muslin is considered sort of like a Bible on muslin, albeit it is written from a more Western perspective, but it has a lot of information, and she has really researched well into this topic to write this book. Then there are a few other books that I had also read from the National Art Library. Some of them are published from the Bangladesh point of view, but nevertheless, they all provide me with a lot of information. And last but certainly not the least, I would like to thank Evelyn Fotherton, who happens to be the current senior curator of South Asia Department of Victoria and Albert Museum, and you'll know why in my next slide. So this was me last year. I had approached Avalon. I told her that I have a personal interest in muslin, and I understand that the best way to really understand the fabric is by touching it, but there's no way I can go back time to 100 years and handle muslin. So how can I do it best? He said, okay, don't worry, you come over to my office, and she arranged this private visit. Those are my hands that you see in the picture. She first showed me the textile that you see on the left. She said that it is a third category muslin with silver wire embroidery, and it was beautiful to touch. Then she showed me the next one, the one to the right. She said that this is category 2, and that was even better. And in the next slide, I'll show you the top category one, which is called Malmal Khas. That was the muslin that was reserved for Mughal royals. And without any bit of exaggeration, I can tell you that I have never in my life touched anything that is remotely similar to that. I cannot describe that in words. You just have to take my word for it. Or you can head over to a museum where these sorts of pieces are kept and ask the curators to grant you a private visit. To the right is not just a muslin, this is a Jamdani muslin. So this was much more difficult to make because Jamdani pattern itself is a very labor-intensive weaving process. And to do it on such delicate yarns, it used to be much more difficult. So this was a piece of a Jamdani sari. It was once a Jamdani sari. It is no longer a sari, but this piece is also kept at Victoria and Albert Museum. So now that I have established my personal interest in muslin, let's go over to the main talk. So muslin has had many poets write beautiful words to describe it. No one probably has done it better than Amir Khusro, and what he wrote is there for you to read. What is important here is that the transparency, the diaphanous nature that almost everyone describes. When you say evening dew or running water or woven wind, it means that the muslin basically is a textile that is so transparent. Now, nowadays, we come across many transparent fabrics, but the difference with muslin was that muslin, in spite of being transparent, used to be packed with yarns. So if a textile is made with less number of threads, then it will be light, then it will be transparent. But muslin was tightly packed with yarns. So there was a description which said that if you put it on your skin, you won't be able to ascertain where your skin ends and the fabric is beginning. But if you try to pierce it with a needle, the needle is not going to go through because it's just completely packed with thread. And that is something that we cannot do. At present in the modern world, we do not have any cotton plant or any kind of plant or animal product which can make such strong yet light and delicate yarns. So I begin first with a picture of muslin. This was taken on a black background, obviously. Now it's very difficult to take pictures of muslins and you know, in a way that the beauty or the specialty of it is described. It might look like any normal piece of fabric, but as I said, the best test is a field test. I have tried to take pictures, and I've downloaded these pictures from DNA website, but nothing can really visually describe the thinness and the transparency of muslin. Okay, so muslin, as I mentioned, is a legendary fabric. There is mention of muslin in the Mahabharata, then ancient sculptures demonstrate women in transparent clothes. Muslin is mentioned in the chronicles of travelers who have been to South Asia at various points of history. The name muslin probably was given by Marco Polo after Mosul in Iraq. He described a thin, transparent fabric that was found in Mosul. But there is evidence of production of muslin in Bengal from pre-Christian era. However, because the trade route ran through Middle East, Turkey to Rome, probably that's the reason why the Persian name Mosul and muslin was more popularized. But there is also a theory that muslin came from French mouse, meaning something very soft. In the next slide, I have a picture of a sculpture that is found in Sanchi Stoop. Sorry, I have written this by mistake. So this is a picture of a sculpture supposedly of Amrapali in Sanchi Stoop. That is also in Madhya Pradesh. I visited it just a few days ago. And if you look at the lower half of the body, you might feel that the person is not wearing anything. But there is a band and there's suggestion of some folds at the sides. So the understanding is that this woman is wearing a muslin skirt, but it is so transparent that it's not visible. So one big challenge of studying Indian textiles is that because of our weather, textiles do not last for long. So unlike Egypt, for example, where you have mummies preserved with textile wraps for centuries, for millennia, we unfortunately have not been able to find much historic textiles in India because the weather just doesn't agree with preservation of textiles. So we have to rely on ancient texts, whatever our ancestors had documented, and the sculptures and paintings. And there is suggestion that what this woman is wearing is actually a muslin skirt. So what was muslin? Simply putting, it was an open textured cloth, diaphanous cotton that was light in weight and densely packed. Now, historically, it was grown with a special variety of cotton that was native to Arabia and Sub-Saharan Africa. However, those cotton were grown in Bengal and the entire Coromandel coast. Bengal muslin was, of course, the most famous, but other areas of India also produced that cotton and also made muslin. The best variety of muslin, the reason why Bengal muslin was most famous is because there was one particular scientific species of that cotton variety that was only found in the banks of Meghna River. That's a tributary of Brahmaputra in present-day Bangladesh, and that was locally in Bengal. It was called Kutikarpas. That was the particular cotton plant that could produce fibers that were immensely thin yet strong, which could make the famous Bengal muslin. Now, this, sorry, I just got those labels mixed up. So this is a piece of fabric that was made in Radhanagar in the current West Bengal part in the late 19th century. And that was a sculpture, Sanchi Stupa, so obviously this one is not. Now, let's try to explore why, let's try to explore why the muslin was so famous and so legendary. So muslin was judged by the length and the number of warps. So in a length of a fabric, there are several threads that run lengthwise. So it was judged by the length, how many number of threads are being used in that length, and what is the weight. So if we use a lot of threads to create a length of a fabric, then we expect it to have some weight. But in muslin, it was just the opposite. In spite of being tightly packed with threads, it used to be light. So the finest muslin, the Malmal khas, that was meant for the Mughal royals, the one that I showed you at the beginning, it could have up to 1800 threads in a piece of fabric that is 10 yards wide and 10 yards long and a yard wide. And that would weigh only 110 grams. So you can imagine 110 grams is nothing. And a 10-yard piece of fabric weighing just 110 grams, that is unheard of. There's nothing in today's world that can create this sort of fabric. 1800 threads in one length, we just cannot replicate that now. It is said that the entire length of a sari could pass through a ring, and the ring test nowadays is often used to demonstrate quote unquote muslin. But to be honest, a lot of different fabrics can pass through a ring. They just have to lessen the number of yarns that they use, and it will become light and thin. So the ring test is not very reliable in today's world. So in order to make muslin, a lot of people were involved. It literally took an entire village to create a small amount of muslin. First, the cotton needed to be prepared. Kutikarpas grown in Brahmaputra belt was collected. 2 crops were produced in a year. The spring one was better than the autumn one. So the spring one was used to make the best qualities of muslin. Cotton seeds were then stored in oiled earthen pots hung above an open fire, because as you know, we have got a very long monsoon in Bengal, and even when it's not monsoon, humidity in Bengal is quite high. So in order to keep it dry, they were hung above an open fire. Then apologies to all the vegetarians and vegans here, but the cotton was then pieced out using the jawbone of a large catfish that is quite popular as a food in Bengal too. It is called boal. So the jawbone was dried out and used to tease out the cotton. And then the fibers were separated with an iron rolling pin. And then the cotton that was that extracted was used to obtain a downy fleece using a bamboo hand bow. I don't know if any of you have seen the bamboo hand bow. I remember when I was young, we used to have these vendors who came with that bamboo hand bow to fluff up the mattresses. You know, at the beginning of winter, we used to see them walking down the road offering to prepare the mattresses and the blankets for winter. So this was used historically also to obtain the fleece. And then that was stored on the skin of a local mud eel, which is called kuche mach in Bengali. So I managed to get this picture from the book Muslin by Sonia Ashmore. If you can see, there are a few pictorial demonstrations on how muslin was manufactured in Dhaka. Right, after the cotton was prepared, now it's time to prepare the yarn. So humidity was very essential to allow the fibers to stretch. And humidity is still essential for Bengal cotton. So the reason why Bengal cotton looks and feels the way it is, one big reason is because cotton woven in Bengal uses humidity. So it has a certain different feel compared to cotton from other parts of the country. And spinning could only be performed at certain times of the day. In the midday, it was too dry, so they could not do it. They had to do it early in the day or late in the afternoon. And they used to dampen the floors with water so that the humidity remains. They shut the door, used damp floors, and then carried on spinning. Now, remember I said a 10-yard and long and 1-yard wide fabric would weigh 110 grams. Now, a spinner who worked every morning for a month could only produce a maximum of 5.8 grams of yarn. So you can imagine the amount of time that it would take to, prepare just one piece of cloth. Now, after spinning, threads were prepared by soaking, starching, twisting, and bleaching. And then finally, we were ready for the weaving part. The weaving was done in a pit loom. Even now, many handloom clusters of India use pit looms. And back in the day also, this was used by multiple weavers to create one piece of fabric. So two weavers would need 6 months to create just 18 by 1 meter piece of fabric. It took a very, very, very long time. And one big reason was that the yarns was so delicate that they could easily break. So they had to be very careful not to hurry up, especially if they were doing a jamdani. Now, after the yarns were used to weave the textile, a lot more people were involved at the post-production stage. The dhobi had to wash, the rafugards had to darn, then there were beatlers smoothing the fabric with conch shells, the istriwalas are ironed, then there was someone to fold the final product, prepare it in bales, and then prepare it for the final transportation. This slide briefly describes the kinds of muslin that we have. In the background, I have got a picture of a plain muslin. So you know that plain muslin was very much in demand in Europe, and most of the muslin that was made for export was plain muslin. But they could also produce checked varieties, embroideries, and jamdani. Jamdani, of course, was the most difficult and the most expensive kind of muslin that was made. Embroidery was also very popular. Now, there's something interesting that I learned about muslin embroidery. There is suggestion that chicken curry originated in Bengal. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say originated, but it became popular in Bengal as a way to embellish muslin. So Jamdani muslin was the most sought after, but not everyone could afford Jamdani muslin. Even people who could afford muslin and wanted some sort of an ornamentation, and when they couldn't afford Jamdani muslin, they used to settle for a comparatively more affordable option that was embroidered white on white chicken curry. Also, the embroidered chicken curry was popular for the European market, and a lot of the chicken curry designs on muslin that we see are customized for the European market with a lot of flowers, floral, and animal kind of designs. For the Indian market, we had the zari, the silver and gold thread embroidery on muslin. Now, muslin was being exported to the West much before colonization. Even when the Romans were heavily trading with India, they used to send no less than 120 ships in a year and have muslin in exchange for bullion. So you can imagine it was very much in demand. Now, the fame of muslin reached its zenith during the Mughal rule of Bengal. In 1576, Bengal became a Mughal province, and the fame of muslin also reached its peak. Under the Mughals, the ruler of Murshidabad was required to gift 500 pieces of the best muslin every year. It would take 6 months to prepare the pieces, at the end of which a horn would blow and there would be a massive ceremony to celebrate as the weavers finally finished weaving and packed them in ceremonial boxes. Then the procession would lead the boxes down the streets of Dhaka till they were ready to be shipped to Delhi to reach the Mughal emperor. Now, this is something that we shared on Khaki Lab's page a few days ago, that there is a story. Now, there's no way for us to know if it's true or false, but it goes like this, that Aurangzeb's favorite daughter, um, Zebunissa, who was also a poetess, she once she was very much involved in the running of the royal court, and she once came in the royal court, and Aurangzeb chastised her for appearing in court naked, to which she replied that, no, dad, I'm actually wearing 7 layers of muslin. Relax. It's not me, it's the Bengal weavers. So this is a picture of Zebunissa, which is, I think this is probably in Met Museum, New York. And as you can see, she is in muslin, but it's not really hiding much, is it? So there are many poetic names for muslin. There were also grades of muslin. I briefly mentioned it at the beginning. Uh, the Malmal khas was reserved for the Mughal emperor, so that was the finest kind. Then there was Chuna, which was for courtesans, which, did not really hide much modesty. They were courtesans. They were required to be what we now call thirst trap. I think that's a politically incorrect phrase that we often get to hear on social media. But then there were other varieties which were all expensive, but probably less expensive than Malbar khas. So when I was talking to Avalon, she mentioned something that there was a time when the nouveau rich of that era could afford muslin, probably not Malbar khas, but the other varieties. But unlike the Mughals or the kings or the really rich kings who were so rich that they could wear a muslin dress one day, it would tear within an hour and they could just change it to something different. They did not need to worry about the money or 6 months of labor that went into the dress. These people, obviously, for them, that money was a lot. Even though they were rich, but they were not as rich as the emperors. So they would wear the muslin carefully, daring not to move lest they sweat or lest anything tears or breaks. And they would just barely wear it outside and then go back home and change into something different, something that doesn't cost a small fortune. Now, the Portuguese were the first to dominate maritime trade with India in the mid 16th century. Then Dutch, French arrived, and finally it was the British. So almost all of these European colonial powers did establish muslin karkhanas or workshops in Dhaka because they all wanted a piece of the golden egg, or even the hen that lays the golden egg, and we all know who finally got the hen. So under the British, initially muslin export to Britain had really prospered. Muslin was very much in demand in Britain, and one of its admirers was Jane Austen. She had once written a letter to her sister uh, expressing buyer's guilt after she spent her entire savings on muslin. Uh, yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. Yes. So by the end of 18th century, as we know, the styling in women's clothes in Europe had changed. Women did not want the very tightly tailored clothes anymore. They wanted to, go free, and they were inspired by the Greco-Roman sculptures. So the empire waistline came, the free flowing form came, and muslin, with the kind of consistency it has, provided the ideal material to achieve that look. But the weather of Britain is very different to the weather in Bengal. So they needed something to cover themselves with. And that role was played by Pashmina shawls. So empire line gowns made with muslin paired with Pashmina shawls was a very popular look for the socialites of that era. Now, women, of course, are always at the receiving end of social diktats. So even though they wanted to break free and they were heavy admirers of the muslin gown look, but they were also receiving a lot of slander for wearing muslin because of its transparency that led a lot of people were really not happy with the way the muslin gown looked on women. They wanted women to be in more conservative clothes. And at one point, there was a rise in pneumonia among everyone, young women included, possibly because the weather was particularly cold in that year. But even the doctors of that generation attributed the cause to something that they called as muslin disease. They said women are wearing muslin, so they are catching cold, and that's why they are not suffering from pneumonia because we have got inadequate heating, or the weather is too cold, or there's some virus wreaking havoc. It is because women are wearing muslin. So this is a muslin gown. The fabric itself was made in Bengal around 1800, and the gown was finally tailored in England. And this, I mean, if you look at this, you'll see how inspired Jane Austen might have been with this one. Now, after the rise, unfortunately, came the fall. And the fall started, in fact, much before the official establishment of British colonization, British rule in India. Now, as early as 1676, East India Company started looking for cheaper alternatives. And that what made it worse was that Bengal was repeatedly suffering from one famine after another, and there was a short supply of cotton. Then there was trouble between French and English. They kept on fighting. I don't think they still are fighting for various reasons, but that's beside the point. But when the trouble with the French happened between 1792 to 1815, that affected shipping routes, and then export of muslin also suffered. Then we have to remember something, that the British essentially came to India to earn money. Now, as a Bengali, one of the things that we have heard growing up was that in order to push fabrics made in mills in Manchester and Lancaster, the British cut off the hands, severed the hands and fingers of the weavers and forced us to buy their cloth. Now, I've spoken to several historians from both the countries, and my understanding is that it probably is an exaggeration. So the British did unleash a lot of horrors on the weavers, probably not by cutting hands. So what they wanted to do is earn money. So they were trying to force the weavers to produce more and more and more. And the kind of economic structure they had for the weavers essentially meant that the weavers almost became like indentured slaves of the EIC officials. They had nothing, almost nothing, and they just did not want to carry on doing this anymore. So some of them might have inflicted self-harm to escape that horror. So there was horror, probably in a different form, not in the form that we get to hear more often. Then invariably industrialization happened in England, and then British workers, they really wanted to push their own products, and laws were changed in England that made it more difficult to import textiles from India. That they really implied, they really levied a very heavy duty on imports from India, that it made it difficult to export goods. What also happened at the same time is that British consumers, they sort of changed their taste. They wanted more standardized textiles that appear uniform. There will not be a blob here or a thread there, which is not going to happen with handloom. So when we talk about handloom, we always go through this, that the handloom is not going to look even, and this disclaimer is present in every handloom retail website that we visit. And so that the kind of look that the British consumers wanted, handloom weavers from Bengal could not produce that kind of a product. That could only be achieved in machines. So that was one reason why people in Britain, they started, to go more towards industrially made fabrics rather than buying muslin, which was expensive. So to them, it did not justify the cost. So the final nail in the coffin was during Britain's Industrial Revolution, when the British government uh, heavily taxed import of fabrics from India. Muslin became too expensive and it was fading in popularity in comparison to machine manufactured items. Gradually, what East India Company did was they converted India to a cotton sourcing center. So Bengal was still growing cotton. They were buying the cotton to make textiles in their own mills rather than buying textiles from India. And in 1817, for the first time, Bengal imported more textiles from Britain than it exported. So, within the first century of formal British rule in India, muslin had already fallen. But the legend of muslin lingers. John Forbes Watson, I think you might have heard his name. He was quite a famous person for the wrong reason. He wrote a very detailed book on textile manufacturers and costumes of India. It was not just a written book. He also attached swatches of virtually every Indian textile that was known to man at that age, and he is said to, he's accused of an industrial espionage, that he took the knowledge of Indian textiles and wrote it in a book for the English audience. And it is said that his book was one of the reasons why Indian design and Indian type textiles could be replicated in mills of England. Obviously not in handloom, but at least the final look looked very similar. Having said that, John Forbes Watson also wrote that in spite of having all the technological advancements, they could not make a fabric as fine like the woven air. But it was too late by then. Whatever the British did, combined with the fact that the constant climate change and constant flooding in the Brahmaputra belt caused putti karpas to become extinct, and then gradually long staple American cotton replaced the indigenous variety that we had in the Dhaka area. So what we use now for cotton, most of the cotton in India, not all of them, is a long staple American cotton variety. Now, all is not lost. There are revival efforts that are being made by people of both sides of the border, West Bengal and Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a project called Bengal Muslin. A lot of people have come together. It is led by a person called Saiful Islam, who I think he's also based in London, and he's also not a textile historian, but he has a personal interest in reviving Bangladeshi muslin. I believe someone had mentioned that in the chat. I had a brief glance about their collaboration with plant geneticists. So they did a research and they found that the only place where some amount of the putti karpas was preserved was at the Herbarium of Kew Gardens in London. So they liaised with plant geneticists and they are conducting DNA sequencing of the plants, of the parts, to try and regrow, cultivate putti karpas once again. Now, at present, now there's a lot of controversy around this. I'll briefly touch upon it in the next slide, but at present, what many textile researchers who don't have any, who shouldn't really have any bias, what they say is that the only weavers who possibly are capable of producing fabrics that are closest to the original form are the Devnath duo from Kalna in West Bengal, Jyotish and Rajiv. I've been to their place. I wish I had that's the video that I have of their workshop. Obviously, we are not allowed to take videos of the weavers weaving the muslin because they export a lot of them and there's copyright on the designs, and plagiarism is a real problem in the textile world. But he kindly showed me a lot of the yarns and their spinning process. But they are the only people who are mentioned in Sonia Ashmore's book Muslin, and I've talked to a lot of researchers who credit them as the only people who have been able to make new age revived muslin that is closest to the original form. So this is Jyotish Devnath. Sorry for the highly pixelated photo, and that is Rajiv at the center. And to the right is a picture of Bengal muslin. The person in white kurta holding the board is Saiful Islam. So that is from Bangladesh. To the left is from West Bengal. Now, I mentioned that putti karpas has become extinct. So the muslin that we had back in the day, we do not have it now. But what do we call muslin? Now, I am, to be honest, I'm still confused. I've asked lots of different people. I've asked historians, researchers. I've even asked Rajiv Devnath, what do you call muslin? Because um, some of the cotton that we use for surgical dressing in medicine, we also call that muslin. Then fashion designers, when they create prototype clothes, the white cotton that they use is also called muslin. Then we have really expensive saris costing lakhs because they are muslin. So what exactly is muslin? I haven't received any definitive answer from anyone. But what I understand that muslin has to be khadi, i.e. the yarns have to be hand spun and it has to be made in a handloom. It has to have high thread count. Now, what is the minimum thread count? I've heard a random arbitrary number of 200. I have no way of verifying if it's correct or not. I do not honestly think that anyone has gone down the formal definition route. So 200 is what most people say is the minimum thread count that should be in a proper muslin. It should be thin, it should be lightweight, it should be soft, it should be delicate. But the best feel of muslin is the feel test. The best test of muslin is the feel test, which is very difficult to know by looking at a picture online. Now, there are some challenges to revival of muslin, and these I have written down based on my understanding of the subject. No one has told me about this, but talking to different people, what I feel is a big challenge is the lack of standardized definition. So as I told you, I have asked so many different people from fashion designers to researchers, but no one has been able to give me a definition of what basic criteria should be fulfilled in order to call something as muslin in 2023. And I think that's the reason why everyone is selling muslin from 2000 rupees to 2 lakh rupees. So I really don't know. And even when I look at West Bengal government's own muslin revival efforts, when I go to their stores in Kolkata, I find that the saris cost a few tens of thousands of rupees, which I expect them to. But then when I looked at their online site, I find, oh, muslin jamdani sari costing 2000. I mean, you don't need to be muslin. You can't even have a cotton jamdani sari for 2000. So I'm very confused why the same brand is marketing two different products as muslin. What is the definition of muslin? No one has been able to give me an answer. There is a general reluctance for research, which unfortunately probably is true for many industries in India. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. I would love to be proved wrong. But this has been my observation, looking at not only textiles but also my work as a doctor, that we love things, we are able to do jugaad, but we don't like to research, unfortunately. Then there's suboptimal public awareness. People hardly know what muslin is. So anything, even mill made. So in Bengal, you have heard of chapa shari. So chapa shari is a very modest, humble, affordable daily wear sari that is printed. The printing mostly is block printing by hand, but the sari is traditionally a mill made sari. So mill made, what we call palum now in Bengal, we used to call mile shari, because that also used to bring down the cost, and these saris were used for daily wear. But those saris, even when I was young, my mother used to buy them, and they were also called mall sari, but they were not mall khash. You're not going to get in a mall khash for 500 rupees. You can still get those saris for 500 rupees in Gadiahat in Kolkata, but they cannot be the muslin that used to be worn by Aurangzeb's daughter. So that malmal is different, but public doesn't know. So it's easy to mislead them. Geopolitics, I've written at the end. I also had a look at one of the members' messages who mentioned about Bangladesh doing their research. Now, this is entirely my point of view, and I am not sure if I should discuss this, so I'll just touch the surface. I'm not going to go into the depth of my opinions. Uh, but because I live in London, so I get to hear things from Bangladesh point of view. Saiful Islam lives in London and he does a lot of talks and things in London. So there's one point of view that I get to hear when I'm in London by attending their talks and their seminars. And there's another point of view that I get to hear from the weavers of West Bengal and also the some of the officials of Textile Department of Government of West Bengal. And the two are, I could understand if they are different, I could understand if they are contradictory, but I can sense a lot of geopolitics and an unhealthy competition in that too. So for me, the jury is still out. I don't know whom to believe. I'll be more inclined to believe the West Bengal people because I'm an Indian after all. But I've heard two very different versions. Bangladesh, obviously, they say that they are the only ones to do the revival. What I've heard from the weavers of West Bengal is that they are the ones who helped Bangladesh set up by providing spinning wheels and the basic infrastructure. But the weavers of West Bengal feel certain resentment because they feel that they are not acknowledged. They have a contribution in the effort, but their contribution is dismissed by the team of Bangladesh. Now, this is what I heard. I have no way of knowing what is true, but I feel that this unhealthy competition is not helping the cause of Muslin. So if we really have to revive Putti Karpas, it's best if we work together. But given the complicated geopolitics of South Asia, I don't see that happening anytime soon. But once again, I'll be happy to be proved wrong.
Thank you so much. That was simply amazing. Uh, it was also very well connected. I think we have Savita on, attending the talk. A few weeks
Mm.
Savita Suri had conducted a talk and taken us through John Forbes Watson's catalog and had exposed us to, how for whatever he did, how there is a catalog of material that existed then, and so much of it is lost. But we so thank you so much for that, because this sort of fits in very well, with that talk. And it is just so unfortunate to feel that a part of our heritage is completely sort of not available to us today. And the very fact that the plant itself is lost, so very heartening to know that whether it is in India or in Bangladesh,
Yeah.
but somewhere there is research on to revive this. I also feel that I think that even today, if we wore muslin the way they wore in Jane Austen's time, we would get the same reactions. So some things just don't
Oh,
change.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm wearing, in fact, I'm wearing. This is a revived muslin. This is from West Bengal. It's obviously not as thin as what Zebanissa wore,
Yeah.
but good that you mentioned this because I'm not carrying a slip because I'm on my holiday, but I was actually going through my husband's luggage trying to find if he has got a small sized vest so I could wear it inside, and that's one reason why I'm covering myself with a Maheshwari dupatta.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this would be a gift to us, irrespective of who recreates this, for us to feel how they felt when they wore these clothes. So, thank you very much. Let me take you through some of the questions and
Sure, sure.
comments that we have. I think it is Savita who's mentioned that she mentioned Saiful Islam's name, saying he's done pioneering
Yes.
work in research. And she also says that she believes that Bangladesh leads the research because they found the closest gene.
Yes, they did. They did. To be honest, I don't think West Bengal had got anything to do with the
Yeah.
gene seekers.
And of course, the Watson catalog that she took us through, I think, I can still see, because I had the privilege of seeing it in person at the Asiatic Library.
Mm.
us through it. I think that's a great documentation of the fabric that you've described. But your images, and I know it must have been very difficult to take those pictures of muslin, but I think you've done a great job in capturing some of them for us. I do have a question for you, and that is
Mhm.
the economics of, and I think we asked this question to Savita as well, the economics of handloom, the economics of weaving a fabric which takes months to prepare, and a lot of labor. How do we get, so the fabric, if it were woven today, and if it takes someone 5 months, and we know there are other things that are getting manufactured, whether it's a pythony or whatever, they become
Mhm.
exorbitantly expensive. How does this economics work? Do they need support from the government, or what would you say?
So, see, in my opinion, this, unfortunately, I mean, these kinds of fabrics, whether muslin or paithani or Banarasi or Kanjivaram, they were not meant for the mass. They were never meant for the mass. They were meant for the royal family who had the resources and who had the intention to patronize. It was also part of the legacy that I'm being a patron of muslin. Uh, we are a republic now. And I feel that it's now the responsibility of the government to take over because these sorts of things, as you rightly mentioned, they are not scalable. You can't have X number. If we try to scale it, then we are going to reach the same eventuality, even if we manage to get the property card pass. Once again, people are going to demand more and more and more, like the British people, and they will want standardized and even and excellent quality at more affordable price, and then once again muslin is going to end up in the same state. So I personally I think it's a more uh, academic, people with more academic interest will probably buy them, uh, but then otherwise I feel that it's the responsibility of the government to keep the heritage alive, because I don't see a way in which Indians only buying these fabrics are going to keep the weavers going. Now, the reason why the Devnath family, I know them personally, so they are doing very well, is because they are exporting. So this is one more thing which I think all Indian handloom should concentrate on. When I started reading about Indian textiles, the biggest lesson for me was discovering that trade was happening between India and other countries for centuries. It was not as if the British came and all of a sudden we started trading to Europe. It was happening for centuries. And the reason why Indian textiles have had such a high reputation internationally for the longest amount of time is because Indian textiles were being exported to everywhere in the world. So I think even the modern day weavers have to think about textile, and the government has to support them in exporting textile. And the Devnath family, they get the most of their income from exporting textiles. They export to big fashion houses like Gucci and Dior, I know they do, and also to Japan. Apparently, muslin is very popular in Japan because they make clothes for the elderly using muslin. It's soft, so it's kinder to their skin. So unless weavers have got generous
Patrons.
business houses internationally who would like to import them, or the government patronizes, I don't really see how 100 sari pack is going to help the cause of muslin.
Maybe our corporates should patronize them as well by supporting.
Yes, yeah, they can. But the thing is that who is uh so then are we going to restrict them to an academic activity, or will we try to empower them to run as enterprises? Like I know Tata Trusts do a lot of CSR activities on textiles. They give a lot of training to the weavers for design innovation, social media usage, photography, communication skills, etc. But the intention is to sell those sarees. Uh, Muslin sarees, for example, will be upwards of 50,000. Some of the really elaborate ones will be more than a lakh. I really wanted a muslin Nilambori sari, which is like a proper heritage, very, very old design. Um, but the price that they quoted, there's just nowhere in, probably in this lifetime, I won't be able to afford that sari. That probably is 4 or 5 lakhs or something. So how many people in India are going to be able to afford this?
Savita has
How?
responded, corporates should stay away from this, to be honest, because they will insist on scaling up and reducing margins. Fair enough.
Yeah, that's true also.
So Commander Mohan Naran has a very interesting point of view, because you were talking about the weavers getting their hands chopped and whether that was true or not. He says that a British merchant in his book Considerations of an Indian Affair, Current State of Bengal and Dependencies, mentions the atrocities on weavers, including crushing of the thumb and wrecking of their looms as a punitive action. So clearly
Okay.
they were impacted in one
Yeah.
way or the other, where they were forced to um,
Yeah,
abandon.
yes. I heard that they after they abandoned weaving, in order to, because they were generational weavers, so in order to keep the practice going, they hid their looms somewhere, and they used to weave gamcha, the traditional towel that we use, just so that they could keep working on the loom rather than completely giving up the practice. But they had to hide in order to do it.
I hope Maheshwar helps you in getting over this feeling of having lost a part of our heritage, and I hope there are other elements of our heritage that are revived by people like you and Savita and others who are doing the research and bringing them to the forefront and introducing and sharing with us, in making us aware of what we might be losing. And if there are no more questions, I'm then going to say thank you to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank
That
you
was
so much.
really very lovely. And thank you to everyone for joining us on a day when many other people choose to watch the cricket match. For those who did, the recording will be available. And see you all next Saturday. Thank you very much, Preeta, for this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.